Hey everybody, this week's Torah portion is Parshat Noach. Now, I had a boss who always used to say that everyone has a price. And while that may or may not be true, one thing is for sure, even if everyone does have a price, it's important to know the currency. So, for example, if I walk over to my 2-year-old daughter and I say to her, I want you to go to sleep a little early tonight, so here's a check for $1,000, that really isn't going to do much. She's going to look at the piece of paper, maybe she'll rip it up, maybe she'll try to eat it, maybe she'll throw it in the garbage, but it definitely won't get her to go to bed early. But if I walk over to her with a lollipop and I say to her, if you go to bed right now, you're going to get this lollipop, then the results will probably be different because that's her currency. Her currency is not cash, it's lollipops. And as she'll get older, it'll switch because adults, if you offer an adult a lollipop to do something, you might not get the same results as if you give them $1,000 check. So it's always important to know before you make the offer, you got to know the currency. Now, in our daily lives, when we're in our relationship with God, which we always are, obviously, it's important to know what God's currency is. And thankfully, this week's Torah portion, God really gives us a little sneak preview, or if you will, or really a little pull behind the curtain to see what is His currency. And we can see that from the following. There are two stories in this week's Parsha. The first is in the beginning of the Parsha, which talks about the state of the world in the time of Noah, or at least towards the beginning of Noah's life, which was a state of complete moral chaos, where you had people stealing from each other and doing bad things to each other, and there was just constant fighting and bickering amongst the people. And in response to that, the punishment was a complete and utter destruction of everybody. God said, I have a certain minimum standard, and if it's not being met, then really I have no need for there to be a planet Earth. It's only here in order to be a place for people to work on themselves and to better themselves and to get reward for that. But if that's not going to be used for, then there's really no point in having it. That's story number one. Later on, towards the end of the parsha, we get story number two, and that story is a story of a group of people who gather together to basically declare war on God. Now, you would think if the first group of people were completely annihilated for bickering with each other, then when they declare war on God, the punishment should obviously be that much greater, way, way, way more serious than what it was for just fighting with each other. But we don't find that, because the punishment they got was just a dispersion of them. So God changed their languages, and they ended up just separating from each other. There was actually no real punishment. If you look at the story in the Torah, just the words themselves, there doesn't even seem to be a punishment altogether. So why is that? Why is it that when it comes to fighting with each other, God decides to completely start over? But when it comes to declaring open war on God, He doesn't really do much to them, if anything. And I think this is a little bit of an insight to us into God's currency, and that is that He really, really loves when we really love each other, and He really, really doesn't love when we really don't like each other. And He'd rather us get along in peace and fight with Him than be in peace with Him but fight with each other. And while it may be hard for us to understand, all we have to do is look no further than our own children. It's very often the parents they'll let things slide when their children are doing something as a team that's wrong, as opposed to when they're doing everything right but they're fighting with each other. That makes parents very uncomfortable. I know for myself, when my kids are not at peace with each other, even if they're all doing the right thing, it bothers me. And if they're staying up late in the room playing a game after they were put to bed, but if they're doing it together, it really does. And I always try to turn the blind eye to that, because when they're working together, I'm happy, and when they're working apart, I'm really not happy. And that's how Hashem is to us. Hashem also, He wants to see us working together and being at peace with each other. And that's just a little insight into His currency. His currency is peace amongst the human race, and it's also obviously good not to declare war on God, but really our first focus, at least from this week's parsha, seems to be that we have to work on each other, on our relationship with each other, before we start working on our relationship with God. Have a Shabbat Shalom from Makor.